Partward, the desert wind blew hot and sharp across the small town of Fairbridge, where dust clung to every corner and dreams often rusted in the garages that lined the back roads. It was a place where nothing new came in, and the old was constantly patched up to survive another day. In the middle of this forgotten town sat a humble workshop named Ramos Auto and Aero Repair, run by a man known as Miguel Ramos, a quiet, weathered mechanic in his late 50s with grease-stained fingers and wisdom in his eyes. Miguel had built his life in that garage. But what truly made his shop special wasn't Miguel, it was his daughter, Leah. Leah Ramos was just 18 years old, but already a legend in the town. A brilliant mind tucked beneath a ball cap and overalls. She could fix anything from a tractor engine to the ancient crop-dusting helicopter her dad kept behind. The shop, she had inherited her dad's hands, but her mind was something else. People said she could listen to a machine and tell you its story. She didn't care much for attention. She just loved solving puzzles, tightening bolts, aligning gears. In a world that tried to underestimate her because of her age and gender, she found comfort in the quiet language of machines. Her father always said, "You're my miracle, Mia." Your mother would have been proud, but the rest of the world? It didn't notice her yet. That would change on a hot Tuesday morning when a black limousine with tinted windows pulled up to Ramos Auto and Aero Repair. The dust barely had time to settle before a door opened, and out stepped a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine. His name was Julian Crane, a billionaire investor, tech mogul, and founder of Crane Aerosystems, one of the top aviation companies in the world. Rumor had it he had recently bought a decommissioned military airfield outside Fairbridge to build a private testing facility. Dressed in a tailored navy suit and polished shoes, Julian Crane looked like he had never held a wrench in his life. Behind him trailed his assistant and a bodyguard. Miguel, wiping his hands on a rag, looked surprised. "Can I help you, sir?" Julian didn't respond to him. Instead, his eyes scanned the place, nose slightly crinkled at the sight of old engines and scrap. Then he pointed toward the dusty helicopter parked out back. "I heard someone here repaired that Hughes 500D. He said, his voice clipped and skeptical. Leah stepped forward from under a lifted SUV. "That was me." Julian blinked at her. "You? Yep, you repaired that rotor system? Got it to fly?" "More than fly. I tuned the blades, calibrated the hydraulic dampeners, and rewired the avionics myself." He smirked. "Cute, I'll take it from here. You're dismissed." Leah didn't move. "It's not for sale," Julian laughed. "I'm not here to buy it. I'm here to verify a claim that someone in this backwater town knows anything about helicopters. I'm testing pilots next week, and the flight system on one of my aircraft is acting up. My chief engineer swore your work saved his life when he borrowed that chopper. But I figured it was probably an exaggeration," Miguel bristled. "Are you saying my daughter doesn't know what she's doing?" "I'm saying," Julian said, turning to Leah with an amused smile, "that real engineering isn't done with duct tape and good ears. It's done in facilities with actual degrees on the wall." Leah stared at him, unshaken. "Do you want your system fixed or not?" Julian shrugged. "Why not? Impress me. I'll have my team bring over the aircraft." Before he left, he turned to his assistant and whispered loud enough for Leah to hear. "If this goes wrong, we'll finally have proof that TikTok mechanics are all hype." Leah didn't respond, but something in her chest burned. That afternoon, a custom-built ultralight experimental helicopter was delivered to their shop on a flatbed. The thing was sleek, jet black, and barely out of prototype stage. But the moment Leah saw it, her eyes lit up like stars. She ran her hands across the frame. "She's scared," she murmured. Miguel raised an eyebrow. "Scared? She's trying to fly like something she's not. They pushed her too fast. She's out of sync." Miguel grinned. "You always did talk to machines," but Leah didn't smile. She opened the access panels and peered inside. Within minutes, she had diagrams spread out, components disassembled, and a tablet showing an error read out the engineers had missed. She muttered, "No wonder it's unstable. Whoever built this rerouted the trim controls through a digital feedback loop without compensating for lateral drift." Miguel blinked. "In English, Mia? They used a smart system that's too smart." It's trying to learn while in flight, and that's causing it to counteract its own movements. Can you fix it? Leah paused. Yes, but not the way they'd expect. Over the next 48 hours, Leah worked nonstop. She didn't eat, barely slept. With classical music playing in the background and the desert wind howling outside, she rewrote the flight control protocols manually. She stripped down the complex interface and restored analog redundancies, safety systems no modern engineer bothered to use. She didn't just repair the helicopter. She taught it how to breathe again. On the third day, Julian returned. He stepped out of his limo with a condescending smile and clapped slowly. Still alive? I figured the dust and duct tape would have buried you by now. Leah didn't answer. She simply pointed to the tarmac behind the shop. The helicopter stood gleaming in the sun. I tuned her. She's ready, Julian laughed. You expect me to fly in that after your repairs? No, I expect you to sit in the passenger seat, she said, tossing the helmet toward him. I'll fly. Julian's smirk vanished. What? You heard me? You don't have a pilot's license? I do. Private rotorcraft, certified last year. Julian looked to his assistant. The man nodded sheepishly. She's legit. Reluctantly, Julian climbed aboard. Leah took off slowly, fingers steady, eyes focused. The moment the skids lifted off, the helicopter purred with harmony. The vibrations that once plagued the system were gone. The yaw was crisp. The tail rotor responded with elegance. Julian sat quietly, jaw tight. Take the controls, she said mid-air. He hesitated, then did. He guided the aircraft through a basic pattern. It responded like a dream. She listens now, Leah said. Because I listened to her. When they landed, Julian stepped out, silent for a moment. Then he turned and said the words no one expected, greater than everyone. I owe this girl an apology. She didn't just fix it. She made it better than my own. Engineers, this is genius.
Word of Leah's repair spread fast. Within days, engineers from Crane Aerosystems began showing up at the Ramos shop, not with insults this time, but with questions. They brought schematics, diagnostics, even faulty parts they couldn't decipher. One by one, Leah solved problems that had stumped Ivy League graduates. The helicopter she'd repaired was flown back to Crane's new testing site outside Fairbridge, and their pilots confirmed what Leah already knew. Her restructured controls made the aircraft safer, faster, and far more responsive in emergency situations. Suddenly, Crane Aero CEO Julian was in a bind. He had publicly mocked Leah, and now her name was being whispered in elite aerospace circles. Industry blogs posted headlines like, Desert Girl outperforms Billionaire's engineering team, helicopter prodigy, or industry wake-up call? She doesn't have a PhD, just results, Julian called another press event. Only this time, it was held at his new testing facility, a gleaming glass tower with drone launch pads and flight simulators. In front of cameras, engineers, and the board of directors, Julian stood beside Leah and said, Greater than I came here expecting to find failure. I found brilliance. Leah Ramos didn't just patch a broken aircraft, she redefined what we thought was possible. Effective today, I am appointing her to a special lead advisor role for our new Lightcraft division. The audience gasped. Miguel, watching from the back, placed a hand over his heart. His little girl was now a name the aerospace world had to respect. Leah stepped forward and addressed the room, her voice calm but firm. Greater than machines are like people. They don't respond to commands, they respond to understanding. When you stop treating them like tools and start treating them like language, they'll speak back. The room fell silent. Then came the applause. In the weeks that followed, Leah began splitting her time between the home garage and Crane's facility. Though she now had access to some of the most advanced engineering tools in the world, she never stopped working with her hands. She redesigned tail rotor configurations. She improved anti-vibration, mounts using recycled carbon fiber. She proposed a modular diagnostic system that could predict failures days before they occurred. And yet, despite all the praise, not everyone was happy. Some of the older engineers at Crane's company saw Leah as a threat. They whispered behind closed doors, "She's just a kid. She never went to MIT. This is a PR stunt." Julian tried to calm tensions, but the seed of jealousy had been planted. One morning, as Leah was working in the wind tunnel lab, a group of engineers entered with a sleek, confidential prototype called the C9 Whisper, a high-speed vertical lift hybrid vehicle Julian planned to unveil at an international expo in Germany. The C9 was Crane Aero's crown jewel worth over $80 million in development alone. Julian approached Leah personally. "This is the big one," he said. "If this flies well, it changes the future of rescue aircraft. We need you to oversee its diagnostics." Leah was honored. She poured herself into the project. For 2 weeks straight, she inspected every line of code, every servo, every pressure valve. What she found disturbed her. A critical vibration issue existed in the transitional lift system. At high speeds, the rotor-to-thrust handoff was delayed by 0.3 seconds, a delay that, in real-world turbulence, could cause catastrophic spin. She presented her report to Julian immediately, but when he shared it with the executive team, it was brushed aside. "Delay the reveal? Are you mad?" barked the CFO. "The expo's in 10 days. "She's just overthinking," muttered another engineer. Leah stood up, furious. "You're not listening. This thing could crash if flown at full throttle under variable wind conditions." Julian believed her, but the board overruled them. "Both. The expo is non-negotiable," the chairman said. "The C9 will fly." That night, Leah sat in her room, heart racing. She knew what she had to do. On the morning of the International Expo in Germany, reporters filled the airfield as Julian stepped out in front of the crowd. The C9 stood gleaming behind him, its turbine blades rotating slowly. But just as he began his speech, a loud voice echoed across the loudspeakers. "Stop the launch." Everyone turned. There stood Leah, holding a tablet in one hand and a toolkit in the other. Cameras swung to her instantly. Julian's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" A board member hissed. Leah ignored them. She walked straight to the aircraft, opened the access panel in front of the crowd, and held up the critical relay component. "This is miscalibrated," she said loudly. "And this delay, under real turbulence, will cause the rotors to lock. I warned your engineers. They ignored me. But I won't let this fly, not while lives are at stake." For a long moment, the crowd said nothing. Then one reporter asked, "Can you prove it?" Leah nodded. She pulled a custom simulation module from her bag, connected it to the aircraft's central system, and showed the timing sequence live on dash screen. 0.3 seconds. A flicker. A stall. A catastrophic failure. The engineers who mocked her turned pale. Julian stared at the data, then turned to the crowd and said, "Greater than, she just saved our company." The crowd at the expo remained frozen for a moment after Julian's announcement. Then, like a slow wave rolling across an ocean of disbelief, the audience erupted applause, cheers, and flashes from hundreds of cameras. Reporters pushed forward to get a closer look at the young girl who had just exposed a catastrophic flaw in an $80 million aircraft. One shouted, "Are you a whistleblower?" Leah calmly replied, "No, I'm just a mechanic who listens." That quote made headlines across every news outlet within hours. Backstage, Julian approached Leah, his voice cracked slightly with emotion. "Greater than, you didn't just save the C9, you saved lives. And you reminded me why I started Crane Aero in the first place, not to impress, but to protect. The board, now shaken by public embarrassment and Leah's accuracy, had no choice but to back down. Several executives who had ignored her warning were quietly let go within the month. Julian gave Leah full authority over the redesign of the C9's control system, and this time the engineers listened. They worked under her lead, carefully, following her instructions, asking questions, and learning the very thing they had once dismissed, humility in mechanics. When the C9 finally flew 2 months later at a smaller showcase, Leah herself was in the pilot seat. The aircraft lifted gently into the sky with zero delay, zero vibration, and total harmony. It was the cleanest liftoff in company history. Watching from the ground, Miguel wiped away a tear. He looked around at the crowd of elite engineers and journalists and whispered, "That's my girl." 1 year later, Leah was no longer just the mechanic's daughter. She was now a full-time chief systems architect at Crane Aero, with her own division of hybrid craft R&D. Despite her title, she still wore boots and overalls most days. Her desk was cluttered with blueprints and coffee mugs, not awards or gold nameplates. She wasn't interested in being famous, only in fixing what others called impossible. Her first major solo invention was called Project Hum, an emergency response helicopter that could land autonomously in high wind zones to save lives in mountain rescues. It used a new rotor adjustment system she invented during a late-night brainstorm after reading an old World War II engineering manual. The day the Hum prototype was deployed in a real rescue operation, saving 3 stranded hikers in Colorado, Leah didn't even see the news. She was in Fairbridge, helping her dad fix a broken lawnmower for a neighbor. Leah's legacy Crane Aero grew faster than ever, and Julian made sure her name was never hidden again. Every board meeting began with a simple phrase etched into the room's main wall: greater than respect the hands that build. In classrooms across the country, girls watched Leah's videos and joined STEM clubs. She was invited to speak at engineering colleges, NASA events, and even a global summit on youth innovation, but she declined most of them, preferring to teach weekend mechanical classes at Fairbridge High. Documentary titled The Mechanic Who Saved the Sky aired on Netflix and reached 82 million views. But when reporters came knocking at her shop afterward, she simply smiled and said, "Machines taught me how to be human. I just returned the favor." Final scene at a company gala held in her honor, Julian took the stage and held up a glass. "To the girl I once mocked, and who reminded me that brilliance doesn't come in suits or degrees. It comes in quiet determination, in dirty fingernails, in fearless hands. To Leah Ramos, the soul of our skies." The entire room stood in ovation, but Leah, she stayed at the back of the room, wearing her signature cap and boots, hand in hand with her father. "Too much fuss," she whispered. Miguel smiled. "It's not fuss, it's respect." She looked up at the projection of her helicopter soaring across the sky and smiled. "Then maybe it's time we teach the world to fly."